Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and this channel is all about running, well, great one-shot adventures and short campaigns. And last week, I was lucky enough to get to go to Scotland. And so that inspired me to review a Scottish adventure, one that combines three of the things that I love the best: horror, brutal battles, and the bard himself.
Huzzah! The bard has heard your call and is here.
No, not the bard that monopolizes the table and always annoys everybody with never-ending charisma rolls. I'm talking about William Shakespeare and his RPG spin-off, Professor Dungeon Master's Macbeth. Macbeth is not only an adventure based on the classic play about unchecked ambition, guilt, conquest, and witches, but it also throws some supernatural madness into the mix. And I will add that this adventure has one of the most shocking twists I've ever played in an RPG. Intrigued? Does Shakespeare's Macbeth make for a good RPG adventure? What if your players have already read the play? Will they still like it? Well, wash your hands of blood, prepare your mind, for spoilers dark and secrets intertwined. Not only shall I Macbeth's game review, but guide you GMs with some tips anew. To run this like the bard in all his might, we'll craft a game both dreadful and delight. Macbeth is written by Daniel DeFazio, aka Professor Dungeon Master, the host of one of my favorite RPG YouTube channels. The adventure is 25 pages long and is designed to be run in just one 4-hour session. Macbeth is written to be system agnostic, so you can use it in almost any RPG system that you like. Although I think it works best with dark and gritty game systems, where death is just a couple of sword blows away. It's great in any OSR D&D-like system, like Old School Essentials, but I recently ran it using GURPS. I'll put a link in the description below with some character conversions for both systems. Macbeth follows the plot of the classic play closely, except with some fantastical twists. The players all play thanes, Scottish lords, that begin in service to the good King Duncan and his fierce general Macbeth. The adventure includes pre-generated character backgrounds for these Scottish lords, including some key characters from the play, like Macduff. Over the course of the adventure, the players act on the fringes of the main story, as well as in some of its key events. They'll be in the castle when King Duncan is killed. They'll witness Macbeth take the crown, become king, and turn power-hungry and eventually turn against them. And in the end, they'll take up arms against Macbeth to overthrow him in the final battle of Dunsinane Hill. Now, even if you or your players don't really know this play very well, it's fine. It'll feel like Game of Thrones to you new folks. The adventure begins with an action scene, with the traitorous forces of Lord MacDonald attacking King Duncan's. There's a huge foggy battle surrounding the players. There's mass combat all around them, and they are ordered to take a critical hill to prevent King Duncan from being cut off. They'll have to lead an assault on MacDonald's men, and here, in the first fantastical twist of this adventure, they'll face off against some horrific Volgoths, these black, pox-filled ravens who swoop in to feast on the dead. And during this battle, in the distance, the PCs will witness Macbeth beheading that traitor MacDonald, and also get a glimpse of 3 huddled witches watching, and maybe even moving to talk to Macbeth. When the players save King Duncan, the battle is won. They can head back to Macbeth's castle at Inverness for a well-earned celebration. Here they'll get to speak to some key players, like the king, the victorious Macbeth, and the sultry Lady Macbeth, and there's others too. And during the feast, Lady Macbeth even tries to hook up with one of the PCs, offering them a night in her bedroom as thanks for their strength and bravery.
Now JC, you were a theater major. Are you sure that's what happened in my play?
No, but I think we all have a player in the group that will immediately say yes to that opportunity. In fact, my players fought over it. Soon after everyone goes to bed, the castle is suddenly awakened. There's screaming, roaring, and moans. Something horrible has happened inside the castle. Soon the PCs discover that there's a murderous man-wolf on the rampage inside the castle. slavering, berserk. This monstrosity is murdering the good lords and servants in Inverness.
Well, that most certainly did not happen in my play.
I think it must have been a deleted scene in the original folio. So now the players have to face down this giant man-wolf. Well, except for the PC who is away with Lady Macbeth. He's sitting this one out. And this fight is intended to be tough. This man-wolf can shrug off blows, deal brutal damage with his razor-sharp claws, and toss people across the hall with ease. Since I was using GURPS in my last play of this adventure, I also added some interesting abilities, like he could cause fright checks with his roars and being able to see in the dark, where he was purposely like running around and smashing torches and lanterns in the castle to make it even harder for the PCs to take him down. So go ahead and customize this man-wolf to really make it scary and intimidating for your players. And once the man-wolf is defeated, the players are in for a shock, because the dead man-wolf transforms into his original human form, the poor player who chose to spend the night with Lady Macbeth. And yes, that flirtatious player is dead. He was ensorcelled by Lady Macbeth and transformed into a monster, and now he has to grab a brand new PC to play for the rest of the adventure. Now, some players may not like this twist, and I get why. After all, they agreed to have a bit of an off-camera fun with Lady Macbeth, not sign their death warrant in a scripted demise. But I think if you have more easygoing players who are willing to go with it, and you're running this as a one-shot, I just love this twist. It's brutal, it's authentically surprising, the looks on your players when they realize who it was that they killed, and the fact that the dead player gets to take on the role of a new Thane who probably now hates Lady Macbeth for a real reason. I think it all works really, really well and informs your players that this is not just a straight-up retelling of the Shakespeare play. And during that same night, King Duncan has also died, presumably killed by that same man-wolf. And a book of spells is found in Malcolm, the king's eldest son's room, and Malcolm has fled the castle, so suspicion is abound. Now, obviously, savvy players know that this was the work of Macbeth. He killed the king, but there's enough weirdness here that your players will probably play along. And so at the end of Act 1, the Thanes all swear to avenge the death of King Duncan. Act 2 begins a year later. Macbeth has now become king, and boy, it's gotten pretty bad in Scotland. The PCs begin huddled in a barn debating what to do about Macbeth, even debating a rebellion. And here, the adventure uses one of my favorite role-playing techniques. I call them banter cards, to fill the players in on what has happened in this last year. It's a technique where the GM hands each player a little card with a handful of bullet points on them. And then players just pick a bullet point and read it aloud or improvise it, and then another player does the same thing from his card, picking one that naturally seems to fit, and it just keeps bouncing around the table until all the information is out. This technique, which I use a lot to kick off some of my one-shots, is just so fun. The GM just sits back and watches the scene play out with the players doing all the work. And it's almost like the beginning of a movie, just unfolding right in front of the player group. It's interactive, it's easy, and it's a tremendously fun role-playing experience that is right here in the middle of the adventure to fill in what would normally be a lot of backstory. And what gets imparted is that Macbeth is a terrible king. He's executing people, nobles have fled, plague has broken out, and goats are even growing two heads in some areas. There are rumors that he and his wife are under the devil's influence and using sorcery to curse the land. Macbeth is clearly not good for Scotland.
How dare you question my most kingly might? A leader strong I am, with boundless right. My wife, both wise and clever, burns with grace. Her beauty shines bright in every place. Together we so just and kind shall reign. Yet doubt me once and you'll die in pain.
And then in the middle of their plotting, they receive a letter from King Duncan's old loyal friend, Banquo, who has recently been assassinated. In this final letter, Banquo reveals that he was there when Macbeth talked to those three witches way back in that first battle. He heard the witches prophesy that his own son, Fleance, will eventually become king, and Banquo urges the PCs to protect Fleance from Macbeth's wrath. Now, in the actual Shakespeare play, Banquo haunts Macbeth as a ghost, and I was a little disappointed that the communication happens here via a letter. Come on, Professor Dungeon Master, you missed out on an opportunity to bring a ghost into this adventure. So I actually changed this scene to have Banquo's ghost appear to the PCs like deep in the forest outside the barn, spooking them, but he's unable to talk because his throat was slit. Banquo's ghost silently urges the players to travel with him a mile or so into the deep forest, where they find a dead messenger on the ground, arrows in his back, and still bearing the letter from Banquo, the one I described above. And nearby, moments from looting that body, are a few of Macbeth's assassins, the ones that killed the messenger. This gives the players a quick action scene here and also adds a little spooky element into this adventure. Banquo's letter urges the PCs to visit the witches to find out more about the prophecy around his son Fleance and maybe get some hints on how to take down Macbeth. Meanwhile, Macbeth's vengeance is everywhere, and he orders some of his soldiers to murder one of the PC's families, ideally the one playing Macduff. I like to make a little tweak here and have one of the assassins, the one that killed the messenger, dying from one of the PC's blows, just spitting blood and revealing that a second band of assassins were sent to sneak into Macduff's castle.
You might have killed me, but even now my friends are killing your children.
And so if the players rush to Macduff's estate, they may show up in time to save one or two of his family members, but the rest will be horribly killed. To give the players a difficult choice, I actually moved the witches closer to Macduff's castle, maybe suddenly appearing in the distance on a nearby hill. So the players will hear their chanting and wander through the woods and see them just not too far away. And then the players have to make a choice. Do they ride hard to the castle to save Macduff's family, or do they go visit the witches that just appeared? Otherwise, if the players ignore the castle and head for the witches, Macduff will lose his whole family from Macbeth's sadistic, treacherous men. This choice can end up in the party splitting, and that's okay here, but I like that this tweak makes the adventure less linear and forces the player to juggle a bit by making some choices as to where they go and which situation is more urgent. Eventually, the PCs will end up at the witches' blasted heath, and they'll hear two critical prophecies from the witches. First, no man of woman born may harm Macbeth. Basically, he's invulnerable to most men. And second, Macbeth cannot be defeated until great Birnam Wood comes to high Dunsinane Hill. To impart a little more urgency into the adventure, I also have the witches say that, by the way, Lady Macbeth is hard at work on dark magic that will override the witches' prediction that Fleance is due to become king. And so, if the PCs don't move fast, there's a good chance that Macbeth's evil dynasty will rule Scotland forever. After this scene, there's an optional encounter where the players must convince Malcolm, King Duncan's son, to begin a rebellion against Macbeth, since he has 10,000 men ready to go to attack Macbeth's castle. You can use this plot, but it will lengthen it a little bit, so if you're on a hard timeline, like you're running this adventure at a convention, I'd look at the clock and maybe skip it if you've got like an hour left or so. I do wish that the adventure with this subplot gave some real consequences to succeeding or failing to convince Malcolm to go on the offensive. So I say that Malcolm doesn't quite have all of his forces yet. Like maybe he has a few thousand men and he's waiting for the rest of the 10,000 to arrive from Britannia. So the PCs have to convince him to strike before he is fully ready. And if they succeed, I actually give all the guards and soldiers the player will face in the next scene, I wound them. I give them a few points of damage, reflecting that they've been in a brutal combat with Malcolm's forces. Otherwise, they're all fresh and ready to go, and it's much harder for the PCs. The finale of the adventure takes place with the assault on Macbeth's castle on Dunsinane Hill. The castle is guarded by expert marksmen and ballistas. So any attack is futile unless the PCs align with the witch's prophecy that Macbeth cannot be defeated until great Birnam Wood, the forest outside the castle, comes to Dunsinane. Now, if your players have read the play, they'll likely think to camouflage themselves with the forest branches and sneak up to the walls, and that works. But the adventure wisely allows other solutions, like making arrows from the trees of Burnham, or building siege engines from the trees, or heck, even burning the entire forest down to act as a distraction.
Oh, I've always wanted to write a play entitled The Angry Ents of Burnham.
Oh, adding Ents to Burnham? Oh, that would be awesome. You are the best, Will. Either way, you as a GM should generally say yes to whatever plan the PCs come with. And if they don't come up with any plan, I did have one group once just ignore the prophecy and try to sneak up to the walls, you have to punish them. To do this, I created an NPC. I called him Ragnar Harrowspike, an elite archer with glowing eyes who mans the walls, who seems to supernaturally see the players and snipe them with his brutal cursed arrows. Harrowspike kind of personifies the protection around the castle, and his defeat or death signals to the players the castle's kind of ready for attack. So when, for example, my players fired Burnham wood arrows at the walls, one of those arrows found Harrowspike's throat, which scattered the defenders, sent them into a panic, and signaled the PCs now is the time to go enter the castle. The adventure concludes with the players confronting Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Macbeth is a typical elite warrior and impossible to kill because of the prophecy, unless the killing blow comes from no man born of a woman. This means any female PC can kill him, and so can Macduff, since he was born by C-section, and that was the solution Shakespeare invented. Lady Macbeth is holed up in an evil chapel with the witches, and in the middle of an occult ceremony and about to sacrifice a kid. I always make this one of the kids of one of the PCs if I can, to really just get them fired up. The PCs need to defeat Lady Macbeth before she completes the ceremony and turns into a monstrous demon and probably wipes out all the players. I've always found this final fight a little easy for players. I've been ratcheting it up over time. Now I supplement Lady Macbeth with some loyal guards, perhaps enchanted with cursed swords, or once I gave the witches, who are kind of incorporeal here and don't really interfere, I gave them a little more oomph. Like I had each witch casting a buff on Lady Macbeth and her guards. And so the PCs needed to interrupt the witches, like knocking over the candles or getting the witches to disappear into the ether once you've kind of unsummoned them and end their spells. I would add a little bit more tactical complexity to this last battle to make it really feel like a strong ending. But if all goes well, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are defeated and the adventure is ended. Fleance becomes king and Scotland is saved. Long live the Highlands! Macbeth is such a fun roller coaster of an adventure. Much like I said with Professor Dungeon Master's Frankenstein adventure, you can tell that he totally, truly loves the source material. He gets it. It's filled with fan service for those who like the play, and yet has enough twists and turns to surprise players. It's fast-paced, it's brutal, horrifying in parts, and it's organized so that it's very easy to run as a GM. You could probably prep this whole adventure to run in an hour or so, except for a little note I'll make below. I also like that it balances combat encounters with social encounters too, and both matter equally. If there's one critique of the adventure, is that it is pretty linear. The adventure goes from one scene to another, and there's very little agency for the players outside of what they do in a given scene. And sometimes it's false agency, like how you deal with the prophecy of Burnham Woods coming to Dunsinane is entirely up to the players, but none of it really matters. Their plan will always work because it needs to. While I think linearity is actually fine for a one-shot, especially one based on a well-known play, some groups may not love that linearity, but this is solvable. You can easily open up Act 2 and spread out key locations and clues geographically, setting the players up more and more to try to take down Macbeth. At the start, while in the barn, just give the players a bunch of objectives up front. They have to convince the hesitant Malcolm to attack, and maybe help get his troops to the land, visit those witches, stop spies at Macduff's castle, or really end up being assassins, and then let the players stealthily travel across Scotland and do stuff on their own plans, steadily attracting more and more attention from Macbeth's dark forces as they win victories. This is a fairly easy structural change to make to the middle of the adventure, but it will lengthen the adventure, most likely well beyond a single session. But if your group wants a bigger, more open adventure with more strategy and tactics, that's how you can do it. And also, since this adventure is written to be system agnostic, you do have to be willing, as a GM, to do some upfront work. Create some pre-generated characters, flesh out some bad guys. If you're an experienced GM, this will be pretty easy and maybe even delightful. But if you're newer or don't have a lot of time, it's going to be harder, and you might accidentally create an adventure that's too easy or too hard. Like I said up front, I have some of my pre-gens and VTT assets for GURPS and OSR D&D available for folks, and check the link in the description below where you can download them. I'll also mention that I wish the presentation was a little better. It's formatted fine, it's actually really well organized, but the art and the handouts aren't great. Is that a Photoshop picture of Sean Connery? But ultimately, I think it's the adventure itself that counts, and even with those few caveats, Macbeth is really a fantastic and fun thrill ride. It's one of my favorite one-shots to run for people, and it really does a good job appealing to the entire table. And that's my thoughts and advice for Professor Dungeon Master's Macbeth. I've enjoyed both this and Frankenstein, and I hope he's got more coming in the future. I think Deathbringer's take on Titus Andronicus would be really cool. Professor, yeah? If you enjoyed this review and want to see more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon. And if you've played or run this particular adventure, what was your experience like? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, I'm JC. And just remember, if you're watching this video because you forgot to read Macbeth and you have a paper due tomorrow, really emphasize the part about the man-wolf. Shakespeare used the man-wolf as a metaphor for Macbeth's unfettered ambition. It's true, like really true.